This gentleman posits 5 questions that atheists are too afraid to answer, so let's buckle up and answer them.
Here are 5 questions that atheists do not want to answer. Number 1, where did the universe come from? We know that everything in the universe has a cause, but what caused the universe? What was the first cause?
First, we don't know that everything has a cause. Everything we've observed has a cause. Milkshakes are caused by people, for example, but we don't have any observable empirical evidence that the universe was caused. Everything that begins to exist has a cause is a metaphysical assumption based on our macroscopic experiences. Our studies into the world of quantum physics have consistently and continually defied expectations, leading philosophers to question the very laws of logic themselves. One of the fun aspects of researching the history of quantum physics is understanding why the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics was so controversial. One of the major objections to having it be accepted in the scientific community was its apparent defiance of the laws of non contradiction. You cannot have the statement P and not P. That is, in the Copenhagen interpretation, quantum particles exist in a superposition, both a particle and a wave, until the wave function collapses and it fully becomes a particle. Now, wave-particle duality is just an exception to the laws of logic that we accept. Another concept that quantum physics has us currently looking more closely at is causation itself. At the quantum level, there are some experiments that hint that causation, or at least the flow of time, may not be as it appears at a macro level. This has left some scientists to give up on the notion of traditional causation, as time itself at the quantum level seems to behave almost variably. In fact, some philosophers of science have hypothesized that everything we observe at the macro level is an emergent property of the statistical nature of quantum reality. Now, this isn't proven hard science I'm discussing here. Most of this is a theoretical work that requires a lot more study before an actual resolution comes to be acknowledged. But what you're discussing here, the Lambda CDM event, colloquially known as the Big Bang, is an event that arose out of quantum phenomenon, so the discussion is highly relevant. If the speculation about quantum physics is correct, and if all of our macroscopic understanding of the laws of reality are merely manifestations of an underlying statistical reality in quantum physics, then it's premature to say that the universe has a cause. The universe could very well just be. Now, with all that being said, you are still proposing a fair question. It's obviously one that scientists are actively trying to unravel. And the answer is a resounding, we don't know. Our mathematical models break down at the moment t equals 0. Anything before the first moment of Planck time is invisible to us. It may be that time existed, but in a much more murky quantum state, or that time didn't exist at all and was coupled so tightly with space that the two were impossible to describe separately. It may be that time itself just did not exist before the first moment of Planck time. We just don't know, and we suspect we won't be able to unravel that mystery until the theory of quantum gravity can be developed. It's also possible that our knowledge of science is only seeing the trees for the forest, and there's some kind of overarching system to the universe that we've completely missed, thus causing us a problem in developing a theory of quantum gravity. The fact is, we don't know what happens at t equals 0. Therefore, we must remain agnostic about any definitive cause. Science is provisional. It is always changing as our understanding evolves. Therefore, until sufficient empirical evidence is provided, a null answer is the only honest one. The presenter here says that everything in the universe has a cause, but then asks what caused the universe. But it's a bit of a misunderstanding to assume the universe has a cause in the same sense that the solar system or even galaxy has a cause. It's fallacious to assume that the universe has a similar cause to the things that are inside of it. While it helps us to understand and comprehend things, looking at the universe from a very human, hierarchical perspective is problematic. Sure, we can see things like planets, solar systems, galaxies, and large scale structure, but that hierarchy doesn't necessarily continue to the universe as a whole. To make the assumption is to treat the universe as an object, but we currently have no data that suggests that the universe itself is an object. Rather, it appears to be more of a container of objects rather than an object itself. Sure, there's speculation the universe may be one of many, such as in multiverse conjecture, but that line of reasoning is purely mathematical and doesn't treat the universe as an object, rather as an instantiation of a reality. So while we don't know what kicked off the Lambda CDM event, to jump to the conclusion that there must have been a causer is unfounded speculation. Considering that we're now dealing in the world of quantum reality and not a discussion of macro level events, we must consider events outside of the normal human perspective. Things such as self causation, causation from quantum emptiness, etc., become a reasonable and indeed expected part of the conversation. The thing is, we can't prove or disprove any of it just yet. Some of the conjecture we have is mathematically sound based on our current understanding of reality, and some of it is pure speculation. At the end of the day, science is simply at a roadblock, and until an Einstein level unblocker comes along and helps us figure it out, we're all just left speculating as to what comes next. Of course, a theist will say that God is the first cause, which again is speculation, but my question about God being a first cause is, assuming God is real, how do you get from God to a universe? Abrahamic religions will say God spoke the universe into existence, but that doesn't really make a whole lot of logical sense. How does one speak without a reality to speak into? How does one perform an action without time? Does that give God a location relative to space-time? How does any of that work? Theists, especially Christian apologists, try to hand wave these questions away, saying that the true nature of God is unknowable to humans. But that is an unscientific, unsatisfactory answer, which ultimately boils down to the universe created by magic. Personally, I'd rather say I don't know, as the theistic response seems to reduce the beginning of the universe to a metaphysical act that lacks any clear mechanism. This kind of answer is problematic because it stifles scientific inquiry and halts the progress of knowledge.
Number two, how can there be objective morality without a God? If everything is left up to the individual to decide, then nothing is right or wrong. Everything is just what you think is right and wrong.
My answer is very simple. There is no such thing as objective morality. Rather, morality is subjective based on a number of variables, such as the culture you were raised in, the society you currently inhabit, and the situation you currently find yourself faced with. Is killing people wrong? You might say yes, but there are loads of exceptions to that rule. For example, self-defense, or if you're ordered to by a commanding officer as part of a military campaign. Is killing still wrong in those situations? What about for survival? Imagine two people on an island with no other food sources available but each other. No help is coming in the foreseeable future, and both people are starving. Is it wrong to kill the other person for food? If not, is cannibalism still wrong in that situation? One could argue that despite cultural and religious differences in moral frameworks, that there is an underlying moral objectivity across all of them. However, such a claim faces a significant challenge from empirical observation, namely that while the overt message is the same, the underlying implementation of that message is different. Killing something in one culture is not the same as killing another thing in another culture. One culture, such as parts of America, fully embrace the death penalty and don't see it as a form of killing, rather as a form of retributive punishment, whereas other cultures fully embrace the idea that killing someone is wrong, even as a form of punishment. What about ending yourself? In Christianity, self termination is a sin. But if you said that killing the other person in that situation was objectively wrong, is taking your own life still wrong? After all, starvation and dehydration are two of the worst possible ways to die. Is taking your own life still objectively wrong then? Because here's the crux of the problem: people have done just that. When faced with an impossible situation with no hope of survival or rescue, instead of living through the agony of starving or dehydrating or death via exposure, people have elected to take a dirt nap instead of living through the agony of a slow, torturous death. Were they objectively wrong for doing that? After all, they're killing a person themselves. Personally, no, I don't think so. As an aside here, I also wanted to point out that the stigmatization of suicide in Christianity has done nothing to curtail rising suicide rates in the country and has, in fact, led to an unhealthy approach to suicidal ideation. That is, even so much as discussing such a topic with someone else is seen as taboo, often covering up thoughts of self-harm for fear of being rejected in society. As someone who has survived multiple attempts to end their own life, I can confidently say that the taboo of not being able to openly discuss these feelings, even in the privacy of therapy, has caused an undue amount of hardship. If this topic was not taboo and forced into a closet, it would be easier to get the right people the help they desperately need. The presenter asked about moral objectivity, yet across various religions, we have conflicting moral guidelines. Practitioners of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism follow ismas, or nonviolence, which is the idea that harming living beings is morally wrong and thus are vegetarians. Some Christian groups, such as the Seventh-day Adventists, some Orthodox Christians, and even some Catholics thinks vegetarianism is morally superior. Hinduism considers foods like beef impure because the cow is sacred. Judaism and Islam forbids both pork and shellfish for the same reason: ritual impurity. But none of these religions share a moral framework for what is and is not immoral to eat. So where's the moral objectivity here? If morals were objective, wouldn't all of these religions all agree on what should and should not be banned, along with having the exact reason for their prohibition? What one might observe to be moral objectivity can be parsimoniously explained by observing the cultures that these religions dominate, whereas the theistic response lacks sufficient empirical grounding, whose claims rely solely on unverified metaphysical assumptions. Now that I think about it, if morals were objective, why would little children need to be taught them? Why would little kids need to be taught that murder is wrong and that stealing isn't good? Why would they need to be taught to share their belongings with other kids? If morals were objectively handed down by a creator God, wouldn't they just intrinsically know these things? Now, some moral realists would argue that objective morality requires discovery and education. However, the necessity for moral education is more consistent with a learned, adaptive, evolved behavior, rather than the reception of an innate, divinely instilled knowledge.
Number three, why should we assume that there's an objective truth? Without a God that sets laws and order, shouldn't everything just be completely random?
These questions don't follow, and I'm a little confused as to what the presenter is trying to get at. Let's tackle the first question. Why should we assume that there's an objective truth? We shouldn't. In fact, we don't. If objective truth existed, we wouldn't need things like trials by jury or the empiric scientific method. We could just find the truth, but we can't. If the objective truth existed, it would be sitting there, waiting for us to poke at it with a stick and say, huh, that's neat. It would also help us more parsimoniously explain things. Rather than simply act as a means to sate curiosity, objective truth would help us model and predict things. But nothing that has ever been proposed to be objective truth has ever had the ability to predict outcomes or help us to model reality in some way. Things that have been proposed as an objective truth have always been a post hoc rationalization for things. An objective truth would be able to make predictions, not just in the there will be wars and rumors of wars generic prediction, but in a real, tangible way. For example, an objective truth would have allowed us to run simulations that would predict the War of 1812 or the legendary Emu War, but it doesn't. Instead, every few years a new war breaks out or rumors of war erupt, and someone with a Bible in one hand comes along and proclaims their religion predicted everything. That is not a predictive model, that is a post hoc rationalization that satiates curiosity. So we really have no basis for stating that an objective truth exists. Now, as for the second question, without a God that sets laws in order, shouldn't everything just be completely random? No. How does that even follow? For reality to present itself as it currently does, it must be objectively true? I don't even know what it means for reality to be objectively true. Reality could very well be subjectively true for all we know. It could be statistically true. That is, it's merely the physical representation of the agreed upon collapse of an infinite number of quantum wave functions. I just don't understand what the concept of objective truth in this question has to do with the hypothetical concept of reality being completely random or not.
Number four, how can we trust ourselves? If all of our thoughts are based on survival according to evolution, there's no necessity for them to be based on truth.
Again, the second statement does not follow from the first question. This question conflates two distinct issues: self trust and evolutionary biology of the brain. First, how can we trust ourselves? I don't trust myself. I constantly second guess myself, my decisions, and my actions. I filter my subconscious choices through my higher level cognitive faculties, and then I just act. That's what brains do. They perform actions. My brain is going to do what my brain wants to do. The vast majority of my actions during my life will be performed subconsciously without any higher level of thinking involved. In fact, experiments have shown that before we're actively aware of it, we've already subconsciously made a decision. Now, those experiments are often misrepresented and don't include the higher brain functions that filter out appropriate actions to take, but studies have shown that actions don't form in the high consciousness level, they form subconsciously. So, no, I don't trust myself. I trust my repeated series of actions that take into account how they have hindered or improved my quality of life overall. I then try to adjust my actions to improve the overall quality of my life. Yes, our individual decisions are fallible, but we develop a trust in our cognitive faculties over time because they have been reinforced by repeated success. Self correction and external feedback are essential in learning how to trust ourselves and why we trust ourselves in the first place. While I am aware of my biases and subconscious influences, I trust the overall process of learning and self correction, which is how we collectively improve our understanding of both ourselves and the world. In short, I empirically do not trust myself. This is proven time and again through the process of higher level filtration my brain has. What I trust is my collective learned experiences and self correction methodologies. Now, for the second question, if all of our thoughts are based on survival according to evolution, there's no necessity for them to be based on truth. First, evolution says nothing about the function of the brain. Evolution by natural selection simply states that the organism most fit for their environment will survive better than those that are less fit. That's it. It says nothing about what the brain does, how it functions, or what its purpose is. That is the domain of neurology, and neurology says the brain's primary functions are varied and vast. The brain does a lot of things. Analyzing any given situation, effective communication, navigation, hunting, gathering, analysis, weighing social interactions, procreation, the list goes on and on. The brain is not a simple survival mechanism. It is a very complex thing that does a lot of complex stuff that ensures our survival. Yes, but its primary purpose is not survival of the organism per se, but whatever is naturally selected for in its environment. While it is true that evolution selects for traits that enhance survival, it is also the case that accurate representation of the world, though not perfect, tend to confer a survival advantage. This suggests that our cognitive faculties are, at least in part, tuned to track reality, even if they are not infallible. Also, there's no necessity for our thoughts to be based on truth. Have you listened to people at all? Our thoughts are very hardly ever based on truth. Our active thoughts correspond very closely with our emotions and are intertwined deeply with rational, reflective thoughts. Neither of those two processes ought to be based on truth. Instead, they're based on behavioral learned experiences. Furthermore, the claim that if our thoughts evolved solely for survival, they need not track truth overlooks an important point. Having an approximately accurate understanding of the world is itself advantageous for survival. Evolution has shaped our cognitive faculties in ways that generally promote effective navigation of our environment. Although our thought processes are not infallible and are influenced by emotions, the very success of our species suggests that our brains are, on balance, tuned to discern reality well enough to thrive, not for discerning truth.
And number five, why is every culture so focused on a god? If God doesn't exist, why is everyone so insistent that there is one?
This argument relies on the ad populum fallacy. Just because many people believe a thing doesn't mean it's true. While widespread belief could potentially point to a shared cognitive or cultural process, it doesn't automatically serve as evidence of divinity. Rather, it's potentially evidence of some new psychological or sociological phenomenon that should be studied, not automatically answered with, there must be a creator God. While belief in gods has been a persistent part of human culture, it seems to more serve an evolutionary need than a practical one. We've developed what psychologists refer to as hyperactive agency detection. That is, the evolved tendency to ascribe agency to the unknown. It's a survival mechanism. It's better to assume that the rustling of the bushes is caused by something more powerful than us than to not. As you can imagine, this tendency to see agency in practically everything could very easily lead to a tendency to see agency in, well, everything, especially the beginning of our universe. Researchers such as Pascal Boyer and Justin Barnett have discussed at length how evolved cognitive biases contribute to supernatural beliefs, which has empirical studies behind it supporting these conclusions. This unified agency detection can historically be seen as a tool of social cohesion, which provides a shared framework of survival, which could, in theory, develop into a much more robust moral framework. This type of ideological evolution could explain both the shared morals we seem to possess as humans, such as the desire to not randomly kill everyone, as well as the moral differences that each culture seems to have, which evolved gradually to become independent things based on a shared evolved lineage. Also, not every culture is focused on a creator god. For example, traditional Buddhism does not posit an omnipotent deity, and Confucianism centers on ethics and social harmony rather than worship. Ancient Chinese, Greek, and Roman thinkers and philosophers were often skeptical, and many outright denied the existence of a god or gods. The Piraha people of Amazon have zero belief in gods or in afterlife and only believe what can be demonstrated to be true. Even within cultures that do emphasize gods, the specific deities and their characteristics vary widely across time and space. This diversity suggests that our ideas about gods are better explained as emergent properties of evolved cognitive tendencies, such as hyperactive agency detection, rather than evidence of one universal objective deity. Ask yourself this: if there was one true God, why would different cultures over different time periods have such radically different ideas of what a God is or what an afterlife would be like? If there was one true God, why did people actively believe in and worship the likes of Zeus, Ra, Odin, Quetzalcoatl before monotheistic religions took over? If there was one true creator God that clearly intended itself to be known, then one might expect a more consistent mode of communication. Why would a variety of different languages with different grammatical structures and alphabets exist? And why would they change so dramatically over a combination of distances, geographical separations, and time? Why would it not be more parsimonious for the one true creator God to communicate in a base, universal form of language rather than through incomplete translated works such as the Bible? If there was one true God, why would humans need to be taught about it at all? Why wouldn't a child with no understanding of the world need the concept of a God explained to them? Go ahead, ask a 2-year old that hasn't been taught about a God or gods what a God is, and they'll tell you the brutally honest truth. They don't know. They've never heard of the concept. The real question isn't why does every culture focus on a God, but rather, why do humans have a tendency to ascribe a creator God to reality? So that was 5 questions that atheists are afraid to answer. How do you think I did? Leave a comment and some feedback below so I can continue to improve my argumentation. And if you'd like, leave a suggestion to a video or article you'd like to see me respond to, as I'm always looking for more content to digest.